Here we go. Book club.
This is the first one we did, right? Because the Devil's Highway was not, that was the family thing, right?
Yeah, this
Okay.
is our first book club episode, and you know what I was thinking we should try to do in the future. Like, I think you and I, once we get brave enough to actually try to record video, that our book club episodes should maybe be where we start with that, and we can try to like have those
Yeah.
episodes be episodes that we post up on YouTube as well, and maybe someday, maybe we can even do like virtual live shows where it's like we invite people to this makeshift studio, and then they can, it's like it's live, so we can try that. But anyway,
Yeah, that's a good idea. Start
hello
with
everyone, welcome
booktube.
to book club. I have my wine. Veronica, did you get your Diet Dr Pepper?
I have some unsweet tea, but you're probably going to complain about the ice clinking in there.
No, that's fine. This is fine. This is book club. There will be wine, there will be iced tea.
I
You
have
may
some.
hear
Do y'all
papers.
have these? Do y'all have these things in Austin? It's called HTO, like H.
Oh yeah.
Wait, what is it?
Yeah.
I love it.
HTO. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have one right down the street from us, and I've only had they have something called like citrus energy tea or something like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
tried that one day that I was just like, man, I really need, I hope it lives up to its name, because I really need to just get some stuff in my system so I can wake up. And it didn't, but it was still refreshing. I enjoyed it. But anyway, welcome everybody to our first book club episode. This is Scream Sister. We are a podcast focused on creepy movies and creepy books. I'm your host, Valerie,
Veronica.
and that's my sister, Veronica. We are sisters. We don't mention that every episode, but it is worth reminding people we are actually sisters living in Texas, and we tend to focus a little bit on Latinx stories and movies, but we branch out and we do lots of other things. As a matter of fact, one of the things we're going to be doing at some point this month, Ron and I talked about maybe doing like a movies from the vault thing where she will be taking a revisit with Halloween, and I will be watching it for the first time, because that is not a movie that I have seen either. Again, not because I haven't wanted to, but just because I was little when it came out. And then, for years growing up, it's not like, it's like you got lucky. Like if it was on TV, maybe you got to see some of it. And so I've probably seen parts of it, but I've never seen the whole way through. So it'll be fun to sort of watch that for the first time as an adult, actively paying attention to what I'm watching.
Yeah, in October, in the spooky season, which
In the
is
spooky
tomorrow, right?
season.
Tomorrow's October 1st.
Yeah, when
Wait, how
this
many
episode
days are in
comes out,
August?
it'll be
Yeah.
October 2nd. Yeah, so it'll be we are ringing in spooky season, and we're really excited to ring it in with our book club episode. And this will be a really interesting episode, because I kind of got a little bit of a taste of it yesterday, but it seems like Veronica and I are going to have very differing opinions of this book, which is good. That is because up until this point, I've been thinking, man, you and I have we've liked every movie we've seen, or liked it enough to be able to talk positively about it. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, when are we going to have some clashing here? And it looks like today is going to be the day.
Yeah, Valerie texted me last night, said, "Oh, I found some reviews and I found one a little more critical, so it'll be good to have some balance." And I texted back, "Oh, I have a critical review." So
Yeah. So
let's
all
go.
of the resources from today, we will make sure are available for you guys, including a really great interview that I watched last night, where I'm not really sure of the group that was hosting the discussion, but it was Sylvia Moreno Garcia interviewing Mariana Enríquez. And by the way, everyone, the book that we're talking about today is Our Share of Night by Mariana Enríquez. And so this was an interview where Moreno Garcia was interviewing her about Our Share of Night. And, really great interview. We'll be sure to include that. But in looking at some of the other resources that we had, one of them was an interview from The Guardian, I believe by a Sam Bayer. You may hear paper rustling. I have a bunch of paper. Sam Byers, I'm sorry. And man, that dude reads this woman for filth. Like it is a scathing review. So I was reading through it yesterday, and I was just like, damn, that is rough. But it's fine. We don't have to like every book. We don't have to not like every
No.
book. It's open. I wanted to read you guys what the synopsis is on the book. And by the way, this is book club episode. We are going to be talking about this book as we would if this was an in-person book club. And, I was thinking about it today. I wasn't sure if you and I could possibly talk about this without spoilers. I don't think it would be a very fun book club if we did that. I think,
Yeah, no.
yeah, we just have to talk about it. So if you
Hopefully
haven't,
people have read it because we've mentioned every episode that this is
yeah,
what we're reading for
if
the month. So
it certainly is like on people's radar. So if you haven't read it yet, do maybe give it a read before you launch into this episode, or just know going in that we are going to be talking about this book in full. So here's a little bit of a synopsis on it, though. This is what I'm pulling from Penguin Random House. A young father and son set out on a road trip, devastated by the death of the wife and mother they both loved. United in grief, the pair travel to her ancestral home where they must confront the terrifying legacy she has bequeathed. And that legacy is a family called the Order that commits unspeakable acts in search of immortality. For Gaspard, the son, this maniacal cult is his destiny. As the Order tries to pull him into their evil, he and his father take flight, attempting to outrun a powerful clan that will do anything to ensure its own survival. But how far will Gaspard's father go to protect his child, and can anyone escape their fate? Moving back and forth in time from London in the swinging 60s to the brutal years of Argentina's military dictatorship. I don't know if she says it in the book, but we come to understand is the dirty war, the brutal years of that dictatorship and its aftermath. Our Share of Night is a novel like no other, a family story, a ghost story, a story of the occult and the supernatural, a book about the complexities of love and longing with queer subplots and themes. And then it goes on to say, masterwork of one of Latin America's most original novelists. That's what Dave Eggers has to say. A mesmerizing writer who demands to be read. I did also happen to find, again, on randomhousebooks.com, like a discussion, like book club discussion guide, which I've never really done questions like that. Like I've been part of book clubs. You've been part of book clubs. I've always felt that somewhere, some book club out there is probably doing it, quote unquote, the right way or whatever that means. We've always just gotten together and talk about the book. So anytime I've encountered discussion guides like this, where it's like they ask you to really sit and like contemplate the book and contemplate these questions, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I like the book, or I didn't like the book,
well,
whatever.
and not every book lends itself to like in-depth discussion. But although I think probably most book club, I think some books are labeled book club books because they are, I guess. I don't know. Some books I read, I just don't have a lot to say about.
So before we launch into that, generally speaking, let me go first, and then we'll start with you. Let me go first, and then we'll launch into you. So generally speaking, I really loved the book. I did. We didn't know anything about this author going in. We went in blind, but I really loved the book. There's some things that obviously demand more investigation, and I don't know that we're ever going to get that. And it's sad because I'm like, I want more. I want more here. But I thought the world that she takes you into is just really immersive storytelling that I enjoyed a lot. But what did you think? Because you had a very different opinion. General thoughts. I think we can dive in as we go, but generally speaking.
Well, since last podcast episode, you asked me about if I ever DNF books. I can honestly say that if I did not have to read this, if I hadn't had to have read this book for this podcast, I would have DNF'd this book. About the third of the way in, I was like, good God.
Okay,
and it was a slog from then on to the end.
Okay, so
and I have many reasons for why.
Okay, well, so refresh my memory. So where in this plot line are you at that portion of the book?
Well, even from the very get-go, I just like the writing style, just there was something awkward about it, and I just kind of chalked it up because it is a translated work, and sometimes things just don't translate well from with its native language to English. So I just kind of chalked it up to that. So I switched actually to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator did a better job of making the dialogue and the prose flow smoother than when I was reading it in my own head. So that helped. But yeah, it just like, I don't know. Do you want me to like how do you want to work? Do you want me to dive into all the reasons why this didn't work for me?
Well, okay.
There's a plethora of reasons.
Let's start with some of these questions from this guide, and maybe that will prompt some of your things that you want to bring up. And we're not going to go through every single question, because some of these questions I'm just like, no, that requires excessive thought and I don't want to do it. So we're just not going to answer that question. One of these questions was, how does the novel transcend the horror genre? And I don't really know if it does, but I guess like it is worth mentioning, and they kind of talked about it in the synopsis I read, but there is some real life horror taking place kind of in the background of this story the entire time,
Mm-hmm.
because, and this I'm pulling from a review on this book from the Atlantic from I forget when, but again we'll post this on the show notes. But so 1976, the Argentine armed forces staged a coup against the president of Argentina. In short order, the military installed a junta that suspended political part. I'm saying that right, correct?
I think so.
Okay.
Junta. Junta.
Yes, feel free to
Yes.
call me out if I'm saying it wrong. But that suspended political parties and various government functions and aggressively pursued free market policies, disappeared thousands of people over the next 7 years. So all of this, this regime, this violence, abduction of people, the torturing and murdering of people, this was all taking place kind of in the background of this entire story. And it's what was known as the Dirty War. I guess, like, if we're talking about transcending the typical horror genre, that might be one way it does that, is because there's all this real life horror going on in the background. And she's kind of, the horror that is being inflicted on the characters in this book is kind of, I guess, loosely modeled after some of those real life horrors that were taking place there at that time, like, the
Mm-hmm.
disappearing of people, the torturing of people, all of that stuff. I don't know if you feel differently about that, or
I definitely think like the cult, what do they call themselves? The cult of whatever
the order of
the
something,
order.
but they're just the
Um,
order. Yeah.
they're a cult.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Who worship this dark god that basically just eats them or mutilates them, and
Like
they're all
devours
happy
them. Yeah.
happy about it. Except this cult is all run by elite snobs who
Yes.
use political prisoners or poor people to kind
Mm-hmm.
of do their experiments on. So I think I took that to be as kind of she was drawing a parallel to kind of the state violence that was
Yes.
going on.
Yeah.
And then there was quite a bit of not a whole lot, but the body horror that was in there was pretty, like, poor Luis didn't deserve what happened to him for sure. The brother, Juan's brother.
Yes. I was like, wait. Yes. Yes. Yes.
That was some
Yes.
pretty disgusting stuff.
Did you
That was pretty
find? Did you
horrible.
find that like talking about that stuff? And she does, like, she goes there. She does not hold back. Did you find that stuff hard to read? Was that one of those things where it's like if you could stop reading, you just on that alone you would have stopped reading?
No, no, I'm not real. I don't, unless it's like on the page, harm to children.
Mm-hmm.
That would, because, I once started a book that dealt a lot with like sex
Oh yeah.
trafficking of children, and I had to stop because I just like normal horror, body horror stuff. If it's happening to adults, I'm horrified, but
Uh-huh.
I don't. It doesn't. That's not by itself what will make me stop reading a book.
Well, and there was a little bit of well, I'm sure she'll come up at some point in our discussion, but Mercedes, I'm saying that weird, I'm sure, but Mercedes, who is Rosario's mother, was just like a vile character who does
Mm-hmm.
do like unspeakable things to some of the poor, I guess, like children that are indigenous to the region. Because she can, and because no one will miss them.
Yeah, I mean
No one will go looking for these children.
the way they all talk about kind of the poor people is just like, well, they're just peasants. Like, they don't
Yeah, yeah.
matter.
Like
Who cares?
no one will care that they're gone, and so she sort of like uses them in her, like you say, like experiments to please, to what she feels she needs to do to please this dark god. Even though, like, I think at one point in the book, Juan, the medium, and we'll get to him too, I guess, but Juan tells her like that nowhere does the god say you have to do this stuff or make these sacrifices. This is just you being evil,
Yeah,
you.
it's just
So
people twisting a belief to justify their own
yeah.
wants and needs and predilections. And
So before we get to the next question, because like one of the things that I really enjoyed, which I guess like it's very different for you, but then it's worth remembering, for everyone listening. I was a huge Mad Men fan. Veronica can't stand that show. because she was like, it's a show about nothing. Nothing happens. Like you'll watch an episode and nothing happens. And I'll be like, Veronica, there's so much happening in those quiet moments. And just like all the things
No,
not being said is where it's happening. But you found, what was it, like pacing problems, the flow of language?
like I was reading the book and I was just like, it's a lot of slice of life. And even though these people don't have like your normal everyday
Mm-hmm.
normal quote unquote life, it was still just pretty boring. I mean, it's just too much slice. And I kept thinking, okay, well, maybe this is it's gonna lead somewhere. It's gonna lead somewhere. And so I was saving my kind of final thoughts till I got to the end of the book. And then I got to the end of the book and I was like, nope, that didn't, this book should have been a novella.
Uh
Like
huh.
she could have cut out like not like 90, 85% of this book. Like what, there's like what, 5 or 6 parts in this book, and it just felt to me like the author had started writing the book or writing a story, would kind of hit a wall, stop, and then try to come at the story from another angle, hit a wall, stop, try to. So I felt like she had started this same story from different
Mm
vantage points, like
hmm. Mm hmm.
5 times or however many parts are in this book, and then just in the end decided to like smash them all together in a book. So there was just so much of it, like really, that didn't need to be in there.
And one of the reviews that I looked at, they kind of said the same thing. Kind of said like there was definitely parts of the book that felt gratuitous, that felt perhaps excessive and unnecessary. And I can kind of see what you're saying there. But it is, again, it's just like interesting how different people read things differently. Because I thought that the pacing of it was very captivating for me. And to your point, there were sections of the book that felt really long, or that felt like, how is this going to tie in? And you kind of just had to sort of like be patient and trust the author. And so like then when you get to the end, she does manage to sort of make it all fit together, even if, in my opinion, a little,
Lies.
well, okay, in my opinion, she does bring it all together. It does all tie together, including even that little section that includes that journalist, Olga.
And actually, when I found out, when I watched that interview that you sent me
Uh-huh.
with Sylvia Moraga, when I found out that the author before this book apparently just mostly wrote short stories, then I
Yes.
was kind of like, that's why
Well,
this
yeah.
book felt this way to me.
And
Felt
she
like a
and
bunch of shorts, like, well, not so short stories in some, but that's why it felt like it should have been a novella. To me, it
yeah,
would
I
have been
mean,
more effective. It would have been scarier if
uh-huh.
she had just shrunk and gotten rid of all that extra stuff that didn't really need to be there,
She
and
does
just
have an affinity
condensed it.
for short stories. She has said, and Mariana Enriquez, like she's a former journalist, so she
Mm.
did cover the aftermath of this dictatorship. So that's kind of where her background is. And she also was like a rock journalist at one point. She always wanted to do that. She said that in the interview, and she did do that for a number of years. So she's very sort of well versed in that world. But even the Olga section, even though I felt like that's, if there was a section you could lose, you could maybe lose that section. But in the end, it kind of brought some necessary tie-in between the past and what is the present in this story. So I thought it was kind of a needed component. And if I had any beef, it would be towards the end of the book. I kind of felt like the resolution came together very quickly. You could have, like you said, maybe cut out some unnecessary sections in the middle so that you could spend a little bit more time tying up those ends at the end of the story, and
Yeah,
maybe
because
even
the ending felt like we just kind of, for all
we
the
just
time it took to get there, it's like then the ending was just kind of felt abrupt. It's like
it felt a little
like you rushed to it.
anticlimactic. Yeah, it
Yeah.
felt a little anticlimactic. You
It's
wanted
like she just
more.
decided to, yeah,
I
it's like
like
she just
the
decided to stop writing one day and said, okay, this is where we're going to end it.
Yeah, it's like the comeuppance that people are due. They're due to get their comeuppance. It happens a little too quickly for my taste. Like
Mm.
I wanted
Suffering,
vengeance. I wanted suffering.
suffering.
But
Although
okay,
here's the
okay,
thing. Here's the thing. And another reason why I had it. Quick, let me just preface this by saying
okay.
I wanted to love this book. In fact, of the two books that we've kind of talked about, Devil's Highway, which was nonfiction, and then this one, which is a book that has a lot of supernatural elements. This is the book that when looking at them, I was like, I thought the nonfiction was going to be the chore for me to read, and I was gonna, because this is supernatural stuff. That's my jam. And
Mhm.
it's the total other way around. I love the nonfiction book, and this one was a chore for me to read. When I'm reading a book, I basically experience books one of two ways. The
Mhm.
first way, or one way, is I'm aware the whole time that I'm reading a book. It's just kind of flat words on a page. I'm detached from what's happening. I'm not really invested in the characters or what happens to them. I feel it can be the shortest book. I've read novellas before where I'll feel like I'm just reading forever and ever, and it's been like 4 or 5 pages. Then I have other books where I've read books that are over 1,000 pages long, and I fly through them in like 4 or 5 days. I can look up and realize that I've read 100 pages and it's felt like the blink of an eye to me. So,
Mhm.
and usually with that experience is when I'm like, I sink right into the world. I'm fully invested in it, connect with all of the characters, or at least most of them. I feel like I'm in there with them. I'm feeling their joy, their pain, their fear, whatever they're going through. I'm right there with them. If characters die, I'm sometimes devastated for days. Um, and so with this book, it was the former. The former. I didn't care about any of these characters. I frankly thought all of the adults should have died. Luis, no, because he didn't deserve what happened to him. But all the rest of the adults, including Juan, Rosario, I didn't like Rosario at all.
Yeah.
I just pretty much, and the kids were okay at first, but then once they grew up and were kind of college age, I was like, I don't really care about you anymore
Well,
either.
they weren't fully formed as adult characters. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean that we don't really get the benefit in through the writing of getting to form those attachments of them as a like the entire time that we're
Mm-hmm.
reading a quote unquote adult Gaspar. I'm in my brain. I'm like, you're still a child. Like you're still a child. Like why? I'm not there yet emotionally to have to for you to be dating and making romantic mistakes and things like that. So he said it's a jump. It's it's a big jump of time that is being made within one story. But yeah, I mean, to your point, in one of the reviews that we looked at, this one is from the crap. I don't know where it's from, guys. Again, we're going to link it all. But in one of these reviews, it says complicity is a recurring theme in the novel. And though there are characters who have a clearer sense of right and wrong, there are no heroes, which I think speaks
Mm-hmm.
to what you just said. So just about everyone is guilty, whether by abetting cruelty or ignoring it. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of ties into what you just said. There are no heroes. There are no like great morally correct characters in this story. Again, speaking to like the difference between two readers very close but yet so far apart in terms of how they interpreted this book because like I found it I like and mind you keep in mind that I don't typically read books like this. Like like I said in one of the previous episodes, I like a chapter book where I am just like ticking through it and like okay, I'm through one. There was none of that. It was just, this book is divided into parts and some parts were like I don't know x number of pages, some parts were twice that, and so you're just reading through it and I was just like fully invested in this dark world and I wanted to just sort of like I was reading through it no problem and then kind of just sort of like you just described losing myself in this book to the point where when it was over I was sad that there was no more book. It was just like and that I'm not going to
And I
get
was
any
clapping.
more.
I was like, oh, thank God I'm done with this book.
I was so
Let me tell
sad
you,
and I was
even with the
oh,
audiobook, I usually listen to audiobooks at like 1.5 speed. But
that's so fast, Veronica. Like
no, I mean
I
it's
can
like
do
we're
1.25. That's it.
talking. No, we're 1.5 speed. It's 1.5 speed sounds like natural speech to me.
They're so
Um,
fast.
by
Like,
by about the halfway point, maybe a little over the halfway point, I bumped it to like 2 times speed.
are you
And
serious?
by the last fourth, I was like 2.5 times because I was
Oh
like, I
my
just
gosh.
wanted to be done. I just wanted to be done.
But that's so
I was like,
interesting because like you missed the comeuppance, like that critical moment where there's just like a little bit of like okay, Mercedes got what she had coming, although you wanted to like you
yeah,
wanted
but it
her
was
to
two halves.
yeah you wanted her
I
to
wanted
dwell
her
on
to
that a
suffer.
little bit more,
I wanted
but
Mel to suffer. All those order people. Florence,
yeah.
what was her name? Florence.
So this is one of the things that came up and I don't know where it came. I think I like went digging after this book was over. I went digging for discussion questions like I told you, but then I also maybe just went digging for people's takes and I think I stumbled on a Reddit where this was a Reddit where they were kind of talking about all the loose ends that in their mind and I agree almost warrant a second book. I don't think there's not likely to be one, unfortunately.
No, I think she
Or
pretty much was.
fortunately, in the case of Veronica. Unfortunately for me, but
I
fortunately for
would not
Veronica.
care to read it if it one comes. I'm not interested.
But so like there were so many loose ends at the end that would almost warrant that, because in the book they kind of go through a little bit of the history of the order. And so like at various points, this is what the Reddit commenter posted. At various points in throughout history of the order, there have been what they call, or what we're calling, like near extinction events, where it's just like the vast majority of the core power of the order has been wiped out, typically through, like, I don't know, through a medium, because
Through the mediums, yeah.
they've gone
Should have
through a
let them.
bunch of they've gone through a bunch of mediums. It's a very kind of just violent process on the mediums, and so they don't last long. Mediums
Yeah.
either like they succumb to insanity or they succumb to illness or what have you, so they don't last long. But throughout the course, the history of the order, there have been various moments and points in history where a medium has just like damn near wiped out all of them. And so this is kind of one of those moments where it's just like you can almost launch a second book just sort of based on off of how these children, now adults, who am I talking about? I've already forgotten names. Gaspar,
Gaspar, Pablo,
Pablo,
Vicky. What's the name of the girl that
Vicky,
got the
Adela,
one that got Adela?
Adela.
They got
So you could almost build a new
trapped
order
wherever.
off these kids who are now adults, and what might that look like? And so it's like, yeah, that could be an interesting venue, but we're not likely to get that, because as she says in that interview with Moreno Garcia, she's kind of indicated she's done with this story and she's moved on from it. So
Well,
sad news for me.
she actually finished this story in its original Spanish language, what, in like 2018, 19, something like
Yeah,
that. So
something like that.
It's been years for her. She's kind of
Yeah,
over it.
and she, the way she described it, she's like, this story is no longer mine. It's, I've moved away from it and I'm not connected to it anymore, which I get that. Once you're done writing something, you're done.
The other thing that super annoyed me, it's a trope, and it's not just in this book. It's just a trope that I always annoys me in television and movies and books, where crucial information is not shared with people who should have that information. Like, why in the heck did Juan not? I can understand him not telling Gaspar everything because he was a kid, but your brother, the person that you're trusting to take over the care of your son after you're gone, and you don't tell him anything about the order and the dangers that are going to be always hunting you. Why would you not tell him?
It's hard to say. I mean, and then it's hard to also know for sure if Luis didn't ultimately know on some level who these people were, because remember that Luis and Juan have known these elders
He
in the
just knew
order
they were
since they were kids.
they were bad people.
Yeah.
He just knew they were bad people, but there's a difference between this is a bad person who might be violent versus, these people will sacrifice you
sorry. I just
to their dark god. Just stupid
Okay,
cult
well, so
people.
that was one of the questions. It was, do you think Juan should have explicitly, this is not my question, everyone, but this is in the guide. Do you think Juan should have explicitly warned his son about the order and the dangers that surrounded them? Why or why not?
Yes, at least his brother. And by the time Juan died, Gaspar was older. He should have known. Yes,
Yeah.
100 times yes.
I mean, you can kind of see where I guess I could see where Juan thought he was doing right by all of these people. But, if we're going to be truly literal about it, Juan is a medium. Juan had to, and an extremely gifted medium at that. And first of all, let's back up, because that is one of the questions also, because there's what we think of when we think how, one of the questions is, how did your definition of medium differ from the mediums in Our Share of Nights? So you and I keep saying the word medium. If you haven't read this book yet, then you might be thinking of mediums in a certain way, which is, I think, how I always thought of mediums. I had always thought of mediums as like the people who commune with the dead. Is that kind of how you feel too, Ron?
Well, yeah, and that the dead can sometimes manifest themselves through. But see, that's the other thing we don't really know. We don't really know what this dark god is. Like, it's never really explained.
See, and that's the kind of thing that
what
the
it
second
is.
book. That's why a second book would be needed. But yeah, so for everyone to kind of catch you up, like in this book, it's not necessarily mediums communicating with the dead. These mediums are communicating with what they perceive to be like, they call it the darkness, but they perceive it to be a god, that there are these there's this other world where there are gods, and I think they even refer to Juan as the golden god, and at some point in the book, because when he goes through a ritual where he's channeling the darkness, he kind of transforms into this, I don't even know what, but like the way it transforms for him is that his hands kind of develop into these black claws with gold fingernails, and so he's just like this kind of a demigod. And I think they even use that phrase at one point in the book. He's referred to as a demigod because of how close he is to the darkness. So he's revered by the people in the order, even though they hate his guts. They know they need him because he communicates with this dark god that they kind of look at as the thing they worship. They worship immortality. They seek immortality, and they believe that this god will give them the keys to that immortality, and the god will do it through Juan, the medium. So I forgot where I was going with this. But basically, when we were talking about Juan as being the medium, he's very gifted. He's kind of perceived as being all knowing. He is kind of all knowing in the book. He's able to he's very in touch with his son in terms of being able to feel his son's pain, know his son's thoughts, all of those things. He can enter his son's mind and kind of know his son in that way. So you would think, I'm circling it all back to my point, you would think that he would be able to know that trying to hide things from Gaspar or his brother Luis was not going to do them any good, because it would all go south eventually. So yeah, to your point, maybe he should have told them up front what they were facing before his time was up.
But all the adults, and I don't know if maybe, because I kept wondering, like, okay, Rosario, okay, Tali, okay, Esteban, why are none of you why is everybody so happy to stay in this dumb cult, is what I was like. I just couldn't.
I mean, I always got the
But
sense
then
that where would they
kind of
go?
like
They're the elders in this cult who were like elder women, but like seriously deranged and evil. Like, as we opened this book with Rosario being killed in a bus crash, like caused by the order. Like, they have ultimate control.
Yeah, but they've also talked about, like, what was that girl's name that gets caught in their lost, Annabelle? No.
Adela.
Yes. Her mother Betty.
Annabelle.
Had left. Annabelle. Different horror movie. They talk about how people leave the cult, but the order elite know that they'll come back eventually. So they don't ever really, like, they didn't chase Betty down. They didn't go after her because they just knew that she would come back, and that's what I don't understand. Why would you come back?
I don't know why you would come back, but I could understand why you'd be afraid to leave. Because look at what, like, Esteban's older brother, Eddie.
Eduardo.
Look what they did to him, and look at what they did to again Rosario. Because ultimately, that was caused by them. I can see why they would be afraid to leave, but yeah, once you get out, I don't understand coming back.
Maybe the author was going for kind of writing it as a sort of metaphor for just generational trauma. The trauma the parent gets passed down, because it sounded to me, the way I read it, like Rosario was willing to use Gaspar for the order's purposes.
That was kind of the other thing that made her not a very likable. I will confess, like, out of the sections of the book, I liked her section the least. I mean, I think it was, I'm glad that I got to somewhat get a little bit of a sense of who this woman was, because the book starts and she's already dead. So we don't really know who this woman was. So it's kind of nice to get a sense of who she was. But you kind of very quickly figure out for yourself that you're like, I don't necessarily like her so much. Like, she's not a terrible person, but she's not as, I don't know, she's just like the rest of them, essentially. Like, flawed, and everyone's flawed, I suppose. There's nothing wrong with being flawed.
But I would have wanted, not that I really, like I said, I didn't really love any of these characters, but the ending I would have liked to have seen would have been Juan lives longer, is able to escape the order, lives semi-happily ever after, or at least as happily ever after as they possibly could, him and Esteban. I honestly didn't really care what happened to Gaspar, honestly. I hate to say that to him. He's just a kid, but I just didn't care.
It was sad. It, like, honestly, when throughout the course of this book, Juan he's got like heart failure
defects, or
failure. He's got like heart failure is what it is. And so, like, he's run the gamut of operations. They've taken him as long as they can take him. And honestly, he's lived far longer than he was ever expected to live. But yeah, he is dying from the start of this book, and he does eventually die in the course of this book. And it's very devastating. And I thought that was really like the scene where she writes him how he died, and Gaspar kind of coming to that realization, I thought was really beautifully done, just because like their relationship was so complicated. So, you know, an immense amount of love there. Obviously, look at how much he went through and look at how far he went to protect his son, albeit while he was kind of slowly being driven mad the entire time and suffering because of his heart condition. So just dark, violent, complicated, intense relationship that they had. And so when it was finally over, when he finally did die and Gaspar had to sort of reckon with that, I thought that was a very beautiful, raw moment that she captured well. I don't know. I liked it. Let's go on. No, you know, we're not going to go through all of these, but there were some interesting.
Go ahead.
Were you going to say something that you did like? Please tell me.
No, I
Okay.
went poking around afterwards, and I wish I hadn't. I don't know if you did. That story that the kids are watching about that girl that's trapped, and
Was that a real story?
Yes, it's a real story. Don't go looking for it, because
Okay.
there's a video on TikTok, and I thought it was just going to be like a picture of her and the voiceover saying what happened, because it really happened in 1985. There's actual video of this poor girl talking. It's heartbreaking. I didn't even finish it. I couldn't. So don't go looking.
Don't go looking for that. Okay. If for
girl,
folks who've read the book, you know what we're
That was
talking
real.
about. But okay.
That was real.
Good to know. Okay, so here's another good question though. How does the novel's historical backdrop, which is the dirty war,
But also the the 80s, the rise of AIDS,
the rise
was
of AIDS,
going on,
and
with
you know,
Pablo's story.
yeah, there's not even questions related to that. But yeah, that's another one of the big things that go on towards the end of the book when Gaspar and his friends are all somewhat grown, young adults, I should say. Yeah, that is the onslaught of the 80s crisis that is starting. With that as the backdrop, the dictatorship, the disappeared, how does that deepen the story, if you feel that it does? And how do you think that tragedy echoes her narrative in the book? Her other narrative. I don't know. That's one of those questions where I don't have an answer. Because it does. I don't know.
Well, it helps to anchor the story in a certain time. 'Cause sometimes you can read books that are set in a city, but they could be set anywhere. Like it might say, oh, this book is set in Africa, but, well, not Africa, but like it could be set in London, but there's so little description of London as a city that it could be set anywhere. Like it doesn't really matter. I like books where character, setting is almost a character in and of itself. So kind of like putting all these little things in the background, the AIDS crisis, the story of this Omaya girl, which I'm sure for people in Argentina would have, they obviously would probably know better that actually happened, whereas I had to go looking for it.
Why did you go stuff
like that all helps to kind of anchor the story.
Side note, wait, let's step aside. Why did you go looking for that in the first place? You were just like, I want to see if that was real.
Well, I did. Just like I looked up that Zanyartu pit to see if that was real. I couldn't find that, although I think those things,
there were probably lots of pits, like that.
Did happen. She just didn't use a specific one, so that no one would say, "Oh, she's writing my relative was dumped in that pit." So I looked up those kind of things just to see what was fictional and what was actually real. But that, I think, helps to ground the story and sets it in a very specific point in time, which helps make the story a little more real.
So did you feel
not
that
so much for me?
Yeah, I was going to say, did you feel that she did that well, or no, not so much?
No, I mean, it was. I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
I like that type of thing.
Yeah,
I like when stories motivate me to go doing research because I don't know anything about Argentina's history really. So
yeah, I thought, like, I agree. I mean, I thought that it, again, I feel like there were elements where some of the trauma that is inflicted on the characters in this book kind of is a very fantastical version of some of the trauma that was experienced by these people during that time period under that dictatorial rule. So disappearing people, the way that Eddie is kind of driven mad and tortured and turned into this quote unquote monster at the hands of his own mother in this case, who is head of the order. There were plenty of torture scenarios and experiences that occurred during that time period. The disappearance of people, as we talked about. So I think all of that and I think that's even kind of addressed in the book. They kind of utilize the very real tactics being imposed on by this dictatorship as cover for what they're doing, because they're like, we can get away with doing this stuff and disappearing these people and torturing them or using them in our wicked experiments and stuff like that, because nobody will miss them. They'll just assume it's the rulership that is doing this. So yeah, I think it's kind of important to the storyline and definitely helps her narrative along. We already talked about how the definition of mediums, kind of our definition of it as we know it, differs a little bit in this book. One of the questions, why do you think Mercedes was so evil? I have no idea, because she sought power. She was a wretched woman. So Mercedes is the mother of Rosario, a very powerful grandmother of Gaspar. Yes. There's essentially 3 families that make up like the core power structure of the order. And Florence, who is mother to Esteban and Eddie, is one of them. And Mercedes is mother to Rosario. And I think it's just Rosario. I don't think she had a sibling. And then I don't know who the third, I don't remember who the third family is. I don't know that they're heavily featured. But yeah, it's like these women they seek power. They seek immortality. That's like the quest that they're on this entire book. They want to be immortal. And so they will do anything for that, even sacrifice their own children, sacrifice their own grandchildren. So I just think she's driven towards that. And, there is reference in the book to, like we were saying, poor children in the community, in the village, that Mercedes has disappeared and kind of, I guess a trigger warning. We'll mention this at the start of the episode, but we are going to be talking, I'm not going to dive into it too much, but there are some very horrid scenes described in the book of how these children are being kept and treated. Honestly, because I listened to the Lore podcast, there is one being, I don't want to say creature, I don't want to say child. There is one being in the caves where these children are being kept that she has created. I'm using air quotes. I forget what it's called. Yeah, and that is a Lore episode for those of you who follow the Lore podcast like I do. That is a folklore thing, but evidently, it is pulled into use in this book. She has created one, essentially, bottom line. And so if you want to go look for that, what is it called again, Ron?
Imbuche? Yeah. Imbuche, if I'm not mistaken.
We will link to something for those who want to go digging a little bit more.
I had to look it up because I don't know what it was
in the show notes, and I will even try to tag that Lore podcast episode if I can for you guys, so you can go give it a listen. So that's why, that's the only reason I wasn't too horrified reading that in the book, because I was like, oh, I know what this is. I've heard about this before. Very messed up that she has created one. That sucks, but I've heard of this before. So if you haven't heard of this before, I'm sure it can be it is horrifying, but I was a little bit prepped because thankfully I listened to the Lore podcast. So yeah, okay, here, let's get to this question. About 2/3 into the novel, we come across the journalist Olga Gallardo's story about the Zanyartu pit, as you said, and her encounter with Beatrice Bradford. Why do you think Mariana includes this section, which could almost be its own standalone short story, which I think is exactly what you said. Like that could be like its own standalone short story. And does it enrich the greater narrative? I feel like
I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. It would have been an interesting, as a short story, it would have been interesting. I don't know how essential it was to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Story about the order. I mean, if it had been included in a book about the junta and all of that, sure. But for this story about the order and this particular father and son, I don't know.
I feel like
provided anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't necessarily too obvious at first, but I feel like the only reason that Gaspar and his friend Pablo are able to make the connection between Adela and her family and Gaspar and his family is because of this story. Because Olga's her reporting on this uncovers that. Because Beatriz is someone she interviews for her story, and so in reading that they discover, because up until that point, sorry, my dog is distracting me. Up until this point, Gaspar doesn't know he's related to Adela. He does not know that Adela is her cousin, his cousin. So, I mean, to back up for everyone unfamiliar with the book who is still listening to this episode, Adela is disappeared. They go into a house where there is essentially a portal, and we come to later find out that these portals are kind of random. They exist at various points in the world, and they take you to what's called the other place. This is another place that is kind of controlled by the darkness, but it's called the other place. And so she is, while they're in this house, Gaspar and his friends Vicky, Pablo, Adela, they encounter a bunch of weird stuff, and she goes into the portal and is gone. She's gone presumably forever. At that point that she disappears, they don't know that they're cousins. I didn't know that they were cousins. So it wasn't until Olga's section that we as readers learn that Beatriz is related to Rosario, or maybe we learned that earlier in the book, but it's all tied in there. And then like the way that that Mariana Enríquez ties that into the story later is that when that story is published, or when the kids who are now adults come across that news story, that is where they learn, holy crap, Adela was my cousin. We're related. There's something bigger going on here. And so that's sort of what leads them down the path to discovering Gaspar's family and all that. Long story short, perhaps she could have done a better job of making that connection, but that is kind of what the intent of that section is. It's intended to tie, like I said, the present of this book to the past. So that's kind of what the goal, I think, was. Ron, we've already talked about this before. I think we both believe in ghosts. We both believe in the spirit world, or do we? I don't know. Definitively, where do you stand on it?
I mean, I've never seen one. I don't disbelieve. I'm
That's
open
that's a
to.
follow up question. Have you ever had a supernatural experience or felt the sensation of something just outside your peripheral vision? I'm trying to think. Like, I
No,
don't
but it would
know.
be really cool. Well, you're the one that I was like, what do you want? You want to live in a haunted house with a cemetery in the backyard?
I do. You know, like, have I ever encountered? Have I ever had a supernatural experience? I would say no, but I would also posit, how would I know? Because if you have seen The Haunting of Hill House, and Veronica, I know you have not, but if you have seen The Haunting of Hill House, one of the episodes that I thought they did this artfully well is they kind of put it into your head. It's like, well, what if you have seen ghosts and you just don't know? Like, if you're walking down the street, or you are in a building and you pass by someone, and it's just a person to you. That's who they are. That's what they look like. That there is a human, just
Hmm.
like any other day. Okay, and not realize that the person you just passed was not of this world, was not in fact alive. So I mean, it's just like, no, as far as I know, I haven't encountered a ghost, or have I don't know. You don't know.
Fair point.
So
Okay, well, yeah.
it's
As far as I'm aware, I have not
yeah.
encountered one.
All right. Well, I mean, there are a bunch of other questions here. We could keep going, but I don't really know. Yeah, I mean, like, we've already kind of talked about this. One of these questions, Rosario seemed conflicted over whether to stop the cycle and save her son, or
She didn't
try
seem
the
that
horrible
conflicted to
miracle.
me.
So it's like, do you agree with her? How do you feel about her choices and her motives? And I think
She
you
did
and I
not feel
both
that.
established
Yeah, she didn't feel that conflicted to me. She felt.
she felt silly. She felt frivolous.
Yeah, and she also felt like whatever Juan wants. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she was, I don't know, she was too her identity was she had tied her identity too much to him, which
Mm-hmm.
number one reason why I didn't care for her. I was like, woman, make your own decisions, stand on your own. She tied her identity too much into him and what he wanted, because it was really Juan that to me seemed like he was more into wanting to protect Gaspar. Didn't want
Mm-hmm.
Gaspar to have anything to do with the order, didn't want the order to get their hands on him. Whereas Rosario was like, if Juan hadn't been there or had been been more wishy-washy about it, she would have been like, yes, let the
Well, I
order
mean,
do what they want to do,
I
and
think
one
I
day
think
I'll
what
be in charge of the order with this powerful,
man by my
next
side, yeah.
medium in line. Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that was attempted to, like, I think one thing she attempted to portray in the story is that what's her face, Rosario, Esteban, and Thali, who are all sort of like the three that are kind of charged with being companions of the medium. I think that they are all kind of raised up to be, for it to be understood that that is their, and it's a job that they all take on willingly. It's not, I don't want to make it sound like they
Mhm.
do it against their will. It's a job that they all take on willingly to be his companions, but that is kind of how they're raised up to be. It's like your job is to keep him happy and be his companion and nurture his mental and emotional health because we need him. So again, it was all in service of the order. They're like, do
Mhm.
whatever you do need to do to make him happy. So like in Rosario's section of the book where she is coming of age as Juan's friend and then later on as his lover, she eventually, flees off to London to kind of have her little, mini breakup from him and kind of experience a life without him, because I think she kind of says, I'm paraphrasing, because she kind of says it in the book, because I know that I will have to, or I will be returning at some point to be with this man, because that is what has been chosen for me, essentially. So I don't know. I mean, that's not to say she didn't love him. She did love him, but I think as Esteban, it was the same thing too. Like they kind of talked about how Juan is a difficult man to love. He's a difficult man to be with, but that is what we do, because that is sort of what we're tasked with doing, is being his companions for the duration of his time as the medium. So, and then I feel like that's kind of what Mariana was setting up. I love how I use her first name, like we're besties. But I feel like that's what
Mhm.
she was setting up in the story, is that like, were this to go on, Gaspar would become the medium, Vicky and Pablo. Well, I guess it's just those two,
But
Vicky
see,
and
Vicky and
Pablo.
Pablo weren't tied to the order; like their families weren't part of it.
Yeah.
Adela, Adela,
Yeah.
I think was earmarked to
But Vicky had
be tied to
abilities.
Gaspar.
Remember, like Vicky had abilities. She could diagnose things. Vicky goes on to become a doctor, and she can diagnose things because she can just intuit. You know what she is? Because in the former makeup, Thali is also kind of a quote unquote witch, a healer. But she is a healer using natural methods. And Vicky is also a healer, but she's a healer using scientific methods because she's gone the way of medical science. So it's sort of like an evolution of that trilogy. You had Esteban, Juan, and what's her face? Why am I playing? Tali. And now you're going to have Gaspar, Pablo, and Vicky. So that would be the trilogy that continues on, were this to go on, which it's not. So I did want to tell people a little bit, like talking about that interview that she does with Sylvia Moreno Garcia. It was really nice because you got to kind of hear her talk a little bit and kind of understand a little bit where her was for this novel. She does, like Ronnie and I said, she is more of a short story writer, and so she references that in February of 2023. She had a short story published in the New Yorker, which we'll link for everybody. And what's really interesting, Veronica, is that I had read that story when it published in February of 2023. And I had read it and it really stuck with me. It was really, again, because I love her writing, just really powerful, immersive story writing, very very, I find her use of language very poetic, so like I really liked it. But I read it and then I forgot about it completely. So then we read this book, and after I finished this book and I loved this book so much, I went digging around for more stuff, any references to her and stuff like that, and that short story came up. And so I started reading it again, and then I realized, oh, I've read this before. I've read this. I liked this a lot. And then I was like, holy crap, this is her. I didn't know that when I read it back in February. So it was just sort of like a full circle moment where I was just like, well, wow, I loved this writer even before I read her novel. That's cool. So we'll link that. But what else? What else? What else? Moreno Garcia asked her about the differences with Latin American horror and other types of horror. And so one of the things that Mariana mentioned in the interview was talking about much of the not much, but a lot of the literature in Argentina was kind of seen as being the privilege of the high class, and so they really shied away from what they viewed to be superstitions and flights of fancy that were perceived more low class or more indigenous. And so they really kind of the literature, a lot of the literature in the years she was coming up, I guess, kind of had more of that European gaze. They were kind of European facing in what they wrote and what they chose to prioritize and stuff like that. So, in kind of cutting off the beliefs of indigenous people, she kind of talked about how she kind of feels that in a way makes that writing very disconnected from what's going on with the realities of people and the narratives of the true people of the region. She kind of said that in recent years, there's been lots of writers who are starting to look away from European influence and who are kind of trying to recapture that people's narrative. Overall, I really liked the book.
I am disappointed that I didn't enjoy it, that I didn't like it, because I was looking forward to reading it. Like I said, this is usually the type of stuff that I do love, but it just did not land with me.
But
in any way, shape, or form.
If you so take a break, cleanse from that, and get it out of your feel. But if you ever do want to go and give that New Yorker short story a read, it's a short story.
I would read her short stories.
It's a short story. So I think it is definitely in her wheelhouse. I think she does it really well, and it stayed with me. Like it stayed with me because as I was reading it, it was just like, wow, this is so cool. This is a ghost story, but it's a ghost story unlike a ghost story I've read before, and so I thought it was really interesting.
I would definitely check out her short stories. This one just meandered too much, too long.
Okay, well, so coming up, guys, because we have some stuff coming up. We do have an interview episode which we're going to be airing, and I know we had talked about airing that as like a bonus episode, but that might be more of a regularly timed episode because Veronica, I'm going to be going to ACL with the fam. We're taking the kids to Austin City Limits Music Festival, I think second weekend. I think first weekend is this coming weekend, and we're taking them second weekend. That would be a recording weekend for us. So I'm thinking, perfect. We're going to drop our interview episode in that week, and that'll work out. So we do have an interview episode coming where I got to talk to my good friend Pete Barnstrom, who is one of the writers behind Satanic Hispanics, which is a awesome Latin horror movie anthology that has gotten some release in theaters and hopefully will come streaming soon. But if you haven't seen it, it's just really great. So we talk a little bit about that, but we talk about other stuff too. We talk about Tim Burton a little bit. We talk about Evil Dead and our appreciation for Bruce Campbell. So, we run the full gambit, and we talk a little bit about Pete's fiction writing because he is also a fiction writer as well. So that'll be coming in October. Then we will be doing another movie episode.
Back to the movies.
Veronica has made a pitch for us to go the way of zombies. And I think one of the movies that it sounds like that could be in that vein is the movie REC, or REC as in record. Is that the movie you want to do? Are you feeling good about that one?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know.
Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video.
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Places, but
I don't.
It's another from Spain, Madrid movie. And I did not watch the trailer because trailers give too much away nowadays. So I did not watch the trailer, but it is, I believe it's set in Madrid, Spain, pretty much modern day. And it's kind of a found footage movie.
Found footage movies. So we're gonna do that. It's a Spanish supernatural zombie horror movie. So we'll give that a go. And so the reason we're telling you this now, guys, so like I said, next episode is going to be our interview episode with Pete. The episode after that, and we'll remind you on social media and stuff like that, but the episode after that will be where we will dive into REC. The reason we tell you it now
it would be better if you knew it in advance. That way you can have already watched it if you want to watch it.
Go watch it. It should be on Amazon Prime for rent. So please go give that a watch prior to our episode. And then Veronica, would you like to tell people? So we are going to keep book club going, guys. We want to keep these book club episodes going. And so we are going to pick a new book for us all to read together. Ron, do you want to tell them? You're picking this one. So I picked Our Share of Night. I kind of steered us towards this. So I would like you to pick us the next one. And then if you don't like it, well, then that's your own fault. So
that's my own fault. Yeah. Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. It was a
Yes.
toss-up between that and the one by V. Castro, A Haunting of Somebody or Other. But also in my wheelhouse. Vampires are also in my wheelhouse. And you have read a book by her before and you liked it. So
I did, but
although that is
like,
not
what is it?
a
What does
guarantee to
that
me
mean
that
now? Yeah, what does
it's
that
not
mean now? It means
that is not a guarantee to me.
if anything,
But
it's a vote against it, is what it is.
well, and it's much shorter. So I mean, it's kind of probably more in the usual 300-page range. So
Yeah, yeah, I do
so at
own.
least if I don't like it, it's not going to take me so long to get through it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I did go out and buy that book real quick when it first came out, so I have it, and it's not. It's nowhere near. It's probably half the size of the one we just read, if that. Okay.
I will say though that I am probably in the minority with Our Share of Night because does have its rating on Goodreads is 4.34 stars out of 5. So
Yeah.
most people have really liked it. So I'm in the minority
I
on
mean,
that one.
I think if you love it, you love it. If you don't like it, like, and I encourage you guys, just for both sidesism, if you will, I encourage you to go read that Guardian review, which is a scathing review on the book, because he pulls no punches, and so it's like, yeah, you either love it or you can't stand it. So and that's totally fine. But I really enjoyed it, and I wish there was more story coming out of that verse. I don't know that there will be. It does not seem like there will be, but who knows? Never say never. But yes, our next book will be Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. That is available now. You can go buy that wherever books are sold. And then, yes, our next movie that we'll be looking at, which will be, I guess that will be Halloween, our Halloween episode. It'll release the day before Halloween. We'll be
Woo
talking
woo.
about Rec, but then we'll also, guys, we'll have a little segment similar to the Nightmare on Elm Street segments we did. We'll have a little movies from the vault segment where we will spend a little bit of time talking about Halloween, which I believe Jamie Lee Curtis came out in 1978. How old were you?
10.
10.
And now I did not see it when I was 10, but
How old were you when you saw it for the first time?
oh gosh, I don't remember. Probably in high school. And I
Yeah,
watch it every Halloween.
so we'll spend a little bit of time that episode talking about Halloween, 1978's Halloween. I'm excited because it'll be my first time to see it. But
It's
yeah,
Jamie Lee Curtis's first movie, and now she's an Oscar winner. And you know what? Even watching that movie, like it's very clear her acting is just a level above everybody else in that movie.
thank you guys, everyone, for giving us a listen. As we have said before, every episode, the best way for you to help this podcast grow is to share it with your friends and family. Give us a rate and review. You can also follow us on social media. We're at Scream Sister on Threads and Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel that is also at Scream Sister, and our email. And I know at this time, our email is screamsisterpod@gmail.com. So email us whatever you want to. If you have feedback, if you have questions, if you have movie
Requests.
recommendations, yes, movie requests or book requests, do it. And please get your copy of Vampires of El Norte. Read it with us because we want you participating in this discussion with us. We want to be able to share on the episode what you thought or what questions and opinions you have.
All right. Good night. Or good night. Good night. Goodbye.
Scream Sister is a Nest production hosted by me, Valerie, and Veronica. Editing by me. Production support for this episode provided by Lorenzo Villarreal and Alex Street.